Three here we're doing from Canton Barbell. Last week we talked about a lot of what we call the uncoachables and some stuff that we dictated that we have to get out of the way before we hop into some of the specifics of training. Today we want to hop into some of those more fun topics. So we're going to talk about what we call dynamic effort here. So dynamic effort is what we would use with an athlete mainly to develop that explosive type strength. So when we say dynamic, really what we just mean is one part of a system that develops all different types of strength. So we have absolute strength, which essentially just means how much force can you if you're doing a max effort lift, like whether it be a max effort trap bar deadlift or a squat, and it's usually a single effort, and it's how much force, how much weight can you move with that bar, with the correct technique, of course. But that would be our absolute strength, and our dynamic effort and more of our explosive strength is how can we apply that kind of force quickly. So we can see there's a lot of guys that might be able to lift big weight, but they don't really have that pop in their step, that explosiveness that we're looking for. And of course, that's a huge part in sports. Whether it's pretty much any sport, whether it's getting off the line in a football game, swinging a golf club is dynamic, swinging a baseball bat, delivering the pitch. Nothing really in sports can happen slow. It's all going to be with that explosive pop. So although we preach that lifting weights is such an important part of athletic training, having the right type of strength and being able to transfer that into power is just as important, because your 600-pound deadlift won't mean anything if you can't also take that out into the field of play and deliver your strength in a quick manner. So you want to add to that before we hop into any details?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this video kind of piggybacking off of the Instagram post from the other day, McKinley Baseball. We have a dynamic effort day for them, which they're doing upper body and lower body movement. So after you hear all this and you want to see it in action, go ahead and check my Instagram, check our Instagram, and check that out. So,
all right. So diving into a little bit more. What is dynamic effort? And essentially what we want to do is kind of establish what the goal of it is and compare it. So a lot of times we hear dynamic effort, people think of speed training. And while they do kind of play hand in hand, we want to establish specifically what is dynamic effort. So first of all, what is speed training? And that's a huge kind of almost kind of divisive area we get into where, we have a little bit different view on it than you'll see a lot of places. Whereas, unfortunately, speed training gets kind of played into, the idea of a lot of times you'll see the kids running around and doing almost like a boot camp type deal where maybe they go through the ladder and then they grab the med ball and they do something and they flip the tire, and it turns into like a boot camp style exercise. And because to the outsider looking in, it looks like everything's like go, and it's fast, and you think it's speed training. But when you're moving in that type of kind of constantly exhaustive state, you're not moving at max speed. So it's the opposite of speed training. Really, a good speed training session is what you'll see actually is a lot of standing around, because people are going to be resting a lot. Usually like at least like a 3 to 5 to 1 work ratio. Sometimes like a 10 to 1 rest to work ratio. Because when we're training for speed, we want to take that into the training, which is we want to train fast. So whether we are sprinting or if it's something we're doing in the weight room, you have to be recovered fully, not only just from like a respiratory state, but from a central nervous state. So I always tell these guys, like, even when you think you're ready to go, wait a little longer, because you've got some central nervous system recovery going on that is going to make that difference between how much power you can put into that bar. So that's what really separates kind of speed training, what kind of we look at, from unfortunately what we see get mixed into a lot of other methods out there. And then on top of speed training as well, we know with some of the athletes we work with here, not only the dynamic effort work, but the heavy max effort work could be speed training. So heavy lifting for an unexperienced athlete, or I should say an unexperienced lifter, could be speed training, because if they've never developed any real strength, just getting stronger will make them faster, right? They'll be able to put that type of force into the ground to propel them forward, not even thinking about lifting fast, just by getting stronger, getting more muscle on the body. I mean, the muscle is what moves the body. So if you are 14-year-old, string bean, and you have no muscle, just adding a little bit of muscle will give you what it takes to actually put a little force into your step and create speed. So speed training doesn't have to necessarily be even its own entity all the time, right? Depending on the level of the athlete, what makes them faster will vary.
Yeah, definitely. And that the speed piece doesn't happen without the strength piece. And so if you think that it's just going to be, running drills, agility drills when it comes to speed training, no, it's moving weight fast. It's moving fast in general. And we preach every rep in a well-rested state, you have to concentrate on that rep to be as explosive as possible. There's a difference between being fast and explosive. You really have to concentrate to deliver them the most explosive lift or most explosive movement at that time.
Yeah, so what's important to note, Kenny, you mentioned that there's no speed without the strength component. It's what they call a potentiation sequence, essentially. So that's just where kind of different methods of programming come in, and we, down the road, we kind of dive into how we approach it. But you've essentially got your mass, your strength, and your power, all right? Or once you get to power, you're talking speed, all right? So say we have added muscle mass, like almost like bodybuilder style gaining. Gaining larger muscle doesn't necessarily make us stronger, but a larger muscle has the potential to be stronger. So that's why even as athletics, hypertrophy style training and gaining muscle mass is important, because it doesn't necessarily mean it is stronger. Guys like it's actually kind of like somebody like The Rock's really not as strong as people think because he doesn't train that way. Right. He's just this big guy. He's obviously a strong guy because he has that muscle.
Right, he's isolating his
but
muscle
at his size, he's really not, what some people might think in strength terms because he trains to be in movies and posters and stuff. So he's stronger than your average Joe because he has that much muscle, but he hasn't trained that way, so he has the potential for it. Right. So you've got that sequence. So adding muscle gives the potential for added strength. Now a stronger person doesn't necessarily a powerful person, but a stronger muscle has the potential to be more powerful. So that's kind of plays into what you said, where there is no speed without strength. All right, because if we don't have the strength to begin with, then we can't display that strength in a quick manner. So it all kind of comes together in the whole program. But today we're kind of focusing on that dynamic effort piece. One reason to focus on it here, I think, is because I think it's such a missing component in programs. In fact, what we've learned now is we've got a few guys. One thing we run into in private sector training is that a lot of our athletes do end up in mandatory school lifting programs, which is great, and we have to be left to fill the gaps. So what I found is that often the dynamic effort is the missing gap that a lot of these programs are missing, kind of that explosive movement. So we've got a group of guys now, actually, that are in their their high school training a few days a week, and then they're here with us, and we're strictly doing dynamic effort work and then some repetitive effort work, some of that muscle mass stuff for a few of the muscle groups I've looking at their program, I think is a little lacking. So we'll kind of dive into a few examples here of what it might look like. There's no one right or wrong way to implement it. Every athlete is unique. Every athlete has their own needs, but essentially what you might see, especially with us on a dynamic effort day, is a lot of plyometrics and jumps. So that's a big one for us. Implementing, whether it's a box jump, weighted box jump. We have the hurdle hops. I've recently implemented more trap bar jumps to kind of load the movement up and create high kind of force in that movement. So adding a little bit of mass to the movement. You'll see throwing, so like med ball throwing outside. We'll chuck the med ball around, but high power movements against a light load that can create high amounts of force. And then the big component comes down to some of these barbell lifts that we do. So essentially what we'll do is we'll take the same movements we would do on a heavy strength day, like a box squat or trap bar or sumo or any of those. And essentially what we do is we take a sub-maximal weight. So for us, it ends up anywhere between, athlete to athlete can vary, but I'd say 55 to 75% if they have an estimated 1 rep max. And we're doing 2 to 3 reps where they move the bar not as heavy as they can, but as fast as they can. All right, so they're trying to increase what the acceleration of that bar. It's a fixed amount of weight, and they're trying to accelerate it as fast as they can. You know, you may have heard this before, you know, listening to, you know, guys talk about lifting, but we're trying to create ultimately more force. All right, so if you get into physics a little bit, force equals M times A, mass times acceleration. So we're focusing on maximizing that A portion of the equation to maximize the F portion in the force. And
and we can use accommodating resistance like bands and chains as different tools in that toolbox to add to that sub-maximal weight. As you see in the video that we post on Instagram, doing sumo deadlifts into those bands really forces you to accelerate.
Right, and that's the big thing. You talk about kind of on the, you know, if you talk about on the whiteboard or on paper, you know, putting together this dynamic program, what you have to get into these athletes' heads, which is tough sometimes, is how intense you have to be, you know, how much intent you have to put into each rep. So, I mean, it has to be like your life depends on it. So that's why the accommodating resistance that you mentioned is so important. You know, if you think about a band, as they go, you know, say it's, you know, it's attached to the bottom of the rack and then it's attached to the bar. So as they stand up with the bar, the band stretches and the resistance increases. So if they just put a static amount of force into the bar and not increase, they're going to get, you know, there's a chance to get buried by that. So you have to fire through that band and not get slowed down. Same thing with the chains. As you hang the chains from the bar and the chains come off the ground, the weight increases. If you're just kind of putting a static amount, just kind of, you know, like you're sitting up out of the living room chair, you know, it's going to be 200 pounds here and 300 pounds here, and it's going to catch you like that. And so it gives that kind of feedback to put that intent into the bar. It's the same thing with jumping and throwing. You know, I could put a stack of boxes out there and, you know, tell these guys to, you know, get at it, jump to the top of the box. But if you're not doing it with full-blown intent, then you're not really, you know, creating the power you want. Like, yeah, you could show me that, yeah, I got up here, but it's easy to make it look like, okay, I went from point A to point B. But when it comes to power, it's getting there with absolute maximum intensity. So sometimes that's a challenge as coaches with us, is kind of giving, you know, finding ways to get these athletes to realize, you know, what kind of intent it takes. So that's why I always like to do a demo rep, and sometimes I look kind of goofy to them, I think, like, doing it, but how, you know, watch how intensely I attack this rep. And that's how it has to be. You're not going to go out and play football and, you know, not, and come at this guy and again, give it like a static speed into him, or else he's going to give it, you know, you're going to learn quick. So it's got to be the same intensity. You have to train with the same intensity you're going to play with. And that's one thing that kind of gets, I think, left off, is that programs get turned into kind of these moderate intensity, high rep, almost nothing but the bodybuilder stuff, and it doesn't match the field of play. So that's where, on top of the max effort work, this stuff comes into play.
Yep. Yeah, you tendency for the kids to see lighter weight on the bar. Their first thing they think is, oh, it's going to be easy. I'm just going to do it nice and, you know, just do it like it's a warm-up. But, you know, it takes a little bit to get acclimated to the intensity that we're asking for. It's just like it's almost like if you were going to race somebody, okay, in a 10 or 20, 30-yard sprint, you're going to go as fast as you can, okay? Whether there's a band on you, whether there's a sled on you, it doesn't matter. It has to be full speed every time, no matter what weight is on the bar, even though it's light.
Yeah, and then, you know, if you're complementing this to gameplay, another good thing it does when we set up our, you know, our dynamic moves, so we'll do like 10 sets, 2 to 3 reps, and usually we'll have, you know, sometimes I have guys in here and it's just, you know, it might be on their own, so I'll just kind of set their timer. Or you'll have 2 to 3 guys in a group. And what we try to get going is where it's like you'll have one guy with a certain amount of weight he's supposed to move, hits his reps, boom, rack the bar, other guys get it on and go. And I try to turn it into like a constant go cycle. And what we end up getting is, as a goal, is that you've got a guy performing, you know, say you hit a set of two box squats at high intensity. You're probably doing about 5 to 7 seconds of high intense work. And then you're going to get about 40 seconds rest. So think about that. That's like a, you know, it seems like short rest, but that's like a 8-to-1 rest to work ratio. So what you end up getting is the ability, you know, training the ability to implement that type of power, rest a certain amount, and then get right back in and do it again. So you almost get a little bit of gameplay conditioning in there, where, we want to see, okay, your first 2 sets, yeah, you look powerful, but can you look that powerful if we push you to kind of get in and out in 30 to 40 seconds? Can you put the same force into the bar and move it at just as high a speed on your 10th, 11th, and 12th set? So on top of the force you're producing, can you produce it over and over and over again and get in and out of that bar nonstop and maintain intensity?
And I love, especially in a team setting. I'm a big in a team setting. An urgent weight room, almost an uncomfortable tempo in certain things that we do in the weight room from a team standpoint. It is an electric atmosphere on a dynamic effort bench or squat or deadlift type of day, because that weight room is rocking, the weights are clanging. It is a rotation, it's a communication, it is a dynamic setting. It's really, it's go one play as hard as you can. You have a rest. All right, you play as hard as you can the next play. It's even in baseball. You pitch the ball as hard as you can, or you swing the ball as hard as you can, or you're sprinting to catch the ball as hard as you can, and then you have a rest in between. So it carries on to the playing field.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I do like the urgency of the dynamic group. And that's why I do really like to have the groups. It's fun too. Sometimes you'll get like a one-on-one guy in there, which is great as well. But it's not quite the same as seeing 2 guys get in and out of there. And what you'll definitely find is that, what I've noticed is that, say you got one guy, and he's got his weight, it's, say each guy's at 65%, and he's, snapping his weight, and the other guy's not quite, you can hear that bar kind of snap at the top. Not that, the snapping of the bar is not anything scientific we're looking for, but, he can hear his bar at the top, and then the next guy, doesn't quite hear that. So hopefully, as you go on, you can see that guy's thinking, I got to push a little harder. Guy's. So it is, it's its own atmosphere. If you've never been a part of one, I've actually done it before, where I don't, if the athletes didn't quite get it, or even if it was just a one-on-one guy and I couldn't quite get it going with him, I just kind of hopped in with him. I picked a weight for myself, and that way it could kind of be, that same type of in-out atmosphere. And so, I would get out of my squat and I'd be over there getting getting his weight on, so he could see, push him like, my weight's off. Where are you at? So even down to kind of the intensity of switching out and getting back in, kind of feeds off each other, and it's really one of the more fun days to coach and to be a part of. Even not being, it's not, necessary for, if you're a general pop, 40, 50-year-old, but I, even though I'm not an athlete anymore, I still do enjoy enjoy doing days like that once in a while. Just to keep, I do like to maintain some athleticism as I, age here, and also, just for the fun of it. I still enjoy the camaraderie of it and kind of lead the way. So if you've never been a part of one, love to have you, down one here, that's for sure. And as far as how and when we implement it, that, varies far and wide. I know, for example, with our baseball team right now, we knew we were going to get them twice a week, and I wanted to make sure that we got a max effort and a dynamic effort day. And so I wanted to make sure there were 2 days of rest in between. So what we like to make sure of is that, say you're doing max effort lower work, so you're doing 1 to 3 rep maxes on squat on a Monday. You want to make sure you're going at least till Thursday before you're doing dynamic work lower. So you don't want to just take that one day. The max effort work and dynamic effort work would both be considered high CNS days, high stress CNS days, central nervous system days. So, whether you are taxing it from a heavy weight standpoint or high speed, they're both high rates, of the central nervous system. When you do high volume work and get that pump in the muscle, that's more direct muscular system work. All right, so those you can do a little more often. But when we're talking about CNS, we want to let that recover in between. So we want at least 2 days in between. All right, so with them, we made sure we went Mondays and Thursdays, so we could get both max effort upper and lower, both dynamic effort upper and lower. When we implement it, if we get an athlete for twice a day and they have to be twice twice a week with 1 day in between. Sometimes we've had where they don't do dynamic effort, unfortunately, because they're a beginner and, really just the absolute strength comes first. We want to build that strength before worrying about, the power. So, it's all relative to the athlete. As important as we think it is, it's all got its place. And then when we implement it, like I said, another example is if it's missing in an athlete's program. We've got plenty of kids here that will tell us about their program, and then they're not really doing anything to that extent. And we're talking about like a lot of baseball players we get here. So baseball is all power, right? You either want to throw the ball fast or hit the ball far. Not to oversimplify the game in an insulting manner, but essentially everything's power. Mm-hmm. If you're in the outfield, even there, if that ball gets hit out there, you take one hard lateral step, boom, that's a power sprint. The base running, it's all power. It's not like, soccer where you have to operate at, a fairly submaximal intensity and keep moving. There's nothing to it but power. So these guys have to be able to deliver that high rate of force development, that high acceleration. We even had one of our newer athletes come in and tell us specifically, which was great, to be able to hear this kind of feedback, but came in and told us that he felt his weakness was his explosiveness and his fast takeoffs and whatnot. And sure enough, we did a quick assessment. We were able to find out that was true. I'll kind of dive into how we determined that. If you have nothing to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, and things dynamically too are measured depending on what we're doing. So, like he just said, an athlete comes in and that's his goal, is to become more explosive, and all of a sudden he sees he's moving the bar faster, or he's seeing the weight go up and still moving the bar as fast. There's a confidence that becomes there that's so important to knowing that that's transferring from the weight room, and then that's going to be able to transfer onto the baseball field.
Yeah, great. Like you had said, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of track this. One thing, to tell you're getting stronger too is velocity, right? So I've actually heard of some big time guys out there using velocity. It's actually becoming more of a popular thing of programming. Whereas instead of saying that I'm going to do 90% on heavy day, I'm gonna operate at 1.2 meters per second or whatever. These guys have the equipment for it. But what sometimes we'll see, even if I'm not able to get these guys doing as much as I want with the max effort, is I could say, okay, you have 115 on the bar, and I might be able to eyeball that speed weeks down the road and see how much faster you're moving 115. Mm-hmm. That's improved strength. That's improved power. Both. It can't be improved power without being improved strength. So, that's another way for us to view, where you're progressing in force production. Wanted to hop into how we, I wanted to, before I forgot, viewing the difference between strength versus, I guess, kind of the power or fast twitch type stuff. So one way we do it is a counter movement jump, a counter movement assessment versus a non-counter movement assessment. We did one of these on our new athlete that had brought that in, and sure enough, he was right on the money. So what we would do, we have our Just Jump mat out there that can test your vertical, just digitally, just jump on the mat, land, it gives us a vertical jump. So what we do is, and this is a pretty common known one if you're in coaching and strength, but what we'll have is we're going to have a guy do a regular vertical jump, which is where you're on there, usually their arms overhead, and they snap down real quick, snap up. All right, like you would see regularly. If you watch the NFL Combine, that's how those guys are doing their vertical jump with a counter movement, down, up. So we'll do a few jumps. We'll get an average of those. Then we'll have them do a non-counter movement assessment where they go down into that half squat, arms down, hold, pause, and then up. All right, and what we'll find is that if there's a significant difference when they don't have the counter movement, when they're down, pause, and up, if there is a big difference, like that fades, if without the counter movement it fades big time, then chances are that athlete just needs to build general strength. And that doesn't mean we won't do dynamic effort work with them, but they need to work on their absolute strength, on putting some weight on that bar, probably on putting on some muscle. Mm-hmm. But what we'll find there is that if there's not a big difference between the two, or even strangely enough, in our new athlete, the non-counter jump was a little bit higher, then we know that there's a deficiency in the ability to either create fast force production, or sometimes in that elasticity. Some of those athletic-looking movements that you see when athletes go through hurdles, and they just elasticity, basically just athletic looking. Being able to get off the ground quick, high turnover rate. So that's an assessment we're able to do there and find out, sure enough, that that's what this athlete needs, and it's gone pretty well so far using that. So anything else with that?
We've talking about the counter movement. There's some athletes who are able to load their body. There's a coordination piece to it too. They're able to load their body fast to explode fast, and there's some who are explosive athletes who aren't quite as coordinated or aren't as strong on the deceleration part of that that counter movement to be able to create that force. So being able to assess that too is important.
Awesome. Yeah, and so essentially we'll kind of start to wrap this one up. When we break down speed, essentially, all this stuff, we want to think about what our goal is to become better athletically. So, we like to see these guys, increase their vertical jump, increase their numbers on the bar. But ultimately, they want to become better on the athletic field. And we think that being able to see those numbers improve will make them better athletes. Now, there's some skill-based work. That's where, coaches come into practice. But we want to see it transfer over, to their field of play. So when we're talking about speed, and again, every coach has heard this before, but others may not have. There's really only two aspects of speed to break down that we can change to make an athlete faster. And there's many avenues to go about that. But that kind of famous, equation is stride length and stride frequency. All right, so stride length being how long are you striding, of course. Sometimes you'll watch a professional athlete, if you ever see the Olympic track meet, people will marvel at the stride length of some of these guys. And stride frequency, of course, meaning how quick are you taking steps. All right, and so a big issue that we get because of some of the youth we work with is that, if you think about young athletes, which one do you think they're missing more, stride length or stride frequency? It's going to be stride length, all right, because what stride length comes down to is, again, the strength component, all right, and the force component. You put force into the ground one way, it's famous Newton's third law, you get propelled so far the other way, all right? So think about, like, going to a youth football game, all right? It's kind of funny to watch. Everyone always kind of laughs at, the idea of the little kids in the helmets and whatnot, but you look at the legs out there. The legs are going a million miles an hour, and nobody's going right. Really nobody's going anywhere. And again, that's because they don't have the stride frequency. Number one, they don't have the mechanics yet. Number two, they don't have the muscle and strength. So when we get youth athletes in here, once we break it down that way, we realize we need these guys to get strong and mechanically sound and motor coordinated. But unfortunately, what you'll see even at a young age is you'll get a speed and agility can't pitch to them, and it's running through the sled like, and it's just reinforcing that same thing, the choppy steps. So you're really not getting faster at all. In fact, you're probably doing more. I don't know if it's necessarily going to say more damage, but you're reinforcing that same, habit of fast steps, no force production, where we want to see these guys start to put force into the ground. A good example of how this, comes about is that I always think about a guy, a former Buckeye, Terrell Pryor, and how, people always talk about how fast he was, and people often say, is he really that fast? And because they watch him, they don't feel like he's moving that fast on the field because his legs are kind of. But if you actually look at the ground, he's going beyond 5 yards every two strides.
Right. His
stride length, he's just running down the field like a gazelle. But people don't feel like, they don't see like the fast turnover rate.
Right.
You get like that cartoonish version of speed in your head of like the road runner in the cartoon with the legs. But what it really comes down to is, every step you take, how much ground are you producing? So that's another thing that comes in, when we talk about like pushing sleds to reinforce that, and joint angles and, again, just ground force production is probably the biggest takeaway. That's why, our squats and our deadlifts are so important, because we're doing ground-based exercises where we're pushing at certain angles into the floor to create that. And without that, all we have is that frequency to rely on.
And you talked about youth football and, youth strength and, the part of the youth strength, groups that we're having here soon. Obviously we're not going to be doing, squatting and deadlifting with fifth graders, but they're gonna learn a simplified. They might squat with their body weight, but they're still getting stronger. They're getting that depth. They're learning how to do that. Something as simple as pushing a sled or a walking lunge is helping their legs getting stronger and helping increase the strength for that stride length.
Cool. And then to kind of wrap everything up, that's where it kind of comes into a system that you have to buy into. We can't sell an 8-week program to 8th graders that's going to make them super, way faster and way, more agile. We can't do that. It's a process. They need to learn the movement pattern. Yep. They need to build motor development. They need to start to develop a little bit of strength. And that's where they, get to around, varying years, but 8th to 10th grade, where they can start doing max effort work.
Right.
Then they can start developing power.
Yep.
It is a process, and we're talking a matter of, probably, and again, variance from athlete to athlete, but we're talking a period of a year to 2 here of development. So, we can't tell you that we're going to make your 5th graders super fast and agile in an 8-week period, when there's this much involved in doing it the right way.
It's a foundational program.
Absolutely. So, I think we'll wrap it up there with dynamic effort, unless you had anything else for today. If you have any other questions, there's a ton you could talk about it with methodologies or just different techniques. So, love to hear questions if you have them. Feel free to visit the Canton Barbell Instagram. There's some more posts you can find on there. Our website, cantonbarbell.com, has blog posts about similar topics. And then closing announcements here. Still have our youth programs we're looking to build. Tuesdays, Thursdays, 6 p.m. Saturdays, 10 a.m. Still doing the online training programs. Looking for anyone looking to build an at-home or a big box program. Even if you're at a place like Planet Fitness, anywhere you might have access from one pair of dumbbells to a full gym membership. We want to make a program delivered to you right on your phone. And then anything else from there, I think we'll cover next time. See you then.